every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 a.m. on Thursday the 31st of August. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Sacked on the spot. A new strategy to tackle misconduct in the police force means that rogue officers can be dismissed immediately.
Cowardly killers to court. Judges finally to be given powers to force offenders like Lucy Letby to attend their sentencing, and the Letby inquiry is going to be made statutory, which means witnesses will be forced to testify by a judge.
Ben Wallace steps down. We knew this was coming, but the Defence Secretary has formally resigned this morning. There are rumours that Grant Shapps could replace him. We're going to bring you any updates from Number 10 as they happen.
And American nukes in Britain. US nuclear weapons could be heading for the UK, but where will they be based, and could they put you and I at risk? Well, we knew the Defence Secretary was standing down. He announced in the middle of July he's going. He didn't get the NATO General Secretary job. He's standing down as an MP at the next election. Rumours, the air thick with rumours at Westminster. It's to be that man, Grant Shapps, which would be his 5th ministerial job.
Is there any ministerial job that he hasn't done? Where are the experts? That's what I want to know. Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email, as always. First of all, though, here is the very latest news with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 9:34. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Grant Shapps has been seen arriving at Downing Street. It follows Ben Wallace's resignation as Defence Secretary after 4 years in the post. Mr Wallace says he wants to explore different opportunities and spend more time with his family. Rishi Sunak told Mr Wallace he leaves office with his thanks and respect. Police officers will be automatically dismissed if they are found guilty of gross misconduct under new government plans. Senior officers will have more powers to sack rogue staff and be able to dismiss those who fail vetting checks. The government says the changes could be implemented as soon as next spring. At least 70 people have died and more than 40 injured in a fire in Johannesburg. A multi-storey building caught fire in South Africa's biggest city in the early hours of this morning, with a toddler reportedly being among those killed. Emergency services say the death toll is likely to rise as the search and recovery operation gets underway. And the Chief Constable of Northern Ireland is in the spotlight again as he heads into a critical meeting with the Policing Board. A recent court ruling deemed Simon Byrne's disciplinary actions against 2 junior officers unlawful. The decision was reportedly driven by concerns Sinn Féin might withdraw support for policing, sparking accusation of appeasement from unionists. But the party says there's no threat. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, we knew he was going, and it's now formal. Ben Wallace has gone as Defence Secretary.
That's right. In his letter, he said the Ministry of Defence is back on its way to being world-class.
Our political editor at GBNews, Chris Hope, joins us now live from Westminster. Chris, no surprise he's going. We knew that. But there might be some surprise if it's really true. Grant Shapps is going to get his 5th ministerial job and become the Defence Secretary.
Andrew, that's been confirmed just literally seconds ago before I came on air. Grant Shapps is the new Defence Secretary. His 5th job in government. Of course, he was Home Secretary for a few days under Liz Truss. He also held jobs like Transport Secretary, Business Secretary, Energy Secretary. Back in the day, Andrew, you and I remember when he was party chairman about a decade ago under David Cameron. He's a safe pair of hands, someone who is trusted by the PM to do a good job. There's a war on. It's not a time to take a risk on somebody who's untried in that job. So Grant Shapps is the Defence Secretary.
We've got in the studio with us, by happy chance, Mark Francois, who's the former Armed Forces Minister. Mark Francois, Chris Hope says he's a safe pair of hands. It's an interesting appointment, Grant Shapps, bearing in mind he's never, ever held a ministerial portfolio anywhere near the Ministry of Defence. What does he know about it?
Well, good question. Ben Wallace is going to be an incredibly tough act to follow. And I think, to put it mildly, because it's such a complex department, you know, this is going to be a very steep learning curve for Grant Shapps. He's got a number of really tough issues to deal with. Firstly, is taking over in the middle of, you know, the war in Ukraine, in which we're very heavily involved in supporting the Ukrainians. Secondly, the system of defence procurement, of buying equipment for the armed forces, is broken. The Defence Committee concluded that recently, so did the Public Accounts Committee.
Has been for years, Mark.
Yeah, but it's absolutely definitive now that it is. What's he going to do about that? Thirdly, partly because of the second problem, we can't field a warfighting division, if asked. That is a key NATO commitment. We can't keep our commitments to NATO. What's he going to do about that? And fourth, there's this burning issue about service families accommodation, mould, leaks. We've now got an inquiry into that. What's he going to do about that? Because the knock-on of that is lots of armed forces personnel are leaving the armed forces for that and other reasons. So he's got a very full in-tray. Yeah. The challenge is, what experience of defence has he got to bring to that post?
Well, answer's none, which is why couldn't they have made a simple appointment? It would have occurred to me. James Heappey is the deputy there. He's been a defence minister for a long time. He's got the respect of the generals, the military. That would have been an obvious one. Or there's a very celebrated soldier in the ministerial ranks on your side, Mark, called Tom Tugendhat.
Well, at the end of the day, it's for the Prime Minister to pick senior cabinet appointments. James Heappey, I think it's an open secret, was what you might call the in-house candidate. He's done brilliantly on Ukraine. Many people in the building wanted James to get the job. He hasn't. You know, Grant Shapps is a bright bloke, but he's going to have to come up to speed very quickly.
Mark, he's also the Prime Minister's chum. And in my view, that's why I got the job. This smacks to me of a crony appointment.
As I say, you know, ministerial appointments are a matter for the Prime Minister.
That's diplomatic, isn't it? Mark Francois is being unusually diplomatic. Bev, you want to bring Mark
Well,
in here?
I don't know, I sit here and I listen to these sort of Westminster-centric stories, and I kind of think for the general public, we are so tired of, as you say, Prime Ministers just electing their mates to positions that they don't really know how to do them. And Grant Shapps, Mark, is one of those names which is just, he appears, it's like he's always waiting in the wings for the job to come available, and then there he is. It doesn't fill us with confidence.
Our Home and Security Head, of course, Mark White.
I think there's no doubt he's seen as a jack of all trades. He's
and a master of none?
Well, indeed. And I think in the Armed Forces brief, really, you need someone who is experienced and committed to that role, who will fight tooth and nail for the armed forces because they are facing very difficult times. We know just in the way that the pound has been weaker, we've gone through COVID, that's had a big effect on the cost of some of the items that they're procuring, such as the F-35 strike fighter for the aircraft carriers. We're now got a situation where originally it was supposed to be 138 of these fifth generation aircraft. Now we're down to, I think, if we're lucky, we'll get into the low 70s, which is not going to be enough to have full carrier strike capability as was initially envisaged. There's a lot of issues like that around procurement.
Let's go. I think we want to go back to Chris. There's a lot going on at Downing Street this morning. We obviously have heard in the last few minutes, if you're just joining us, that Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has resigned. And Christopher Hope is down there at Downing Street. Grant Shapps arrived. How long was he in there for before he left, Chris?
About 28 minutes, Bev. As he left, I said, any plans for being Defence Secretary? And he said, love your new show. So he must watch GB News, but he's not going to give us much other thoughts about what his plan is with prosecuting the war or supporting the war in Ukraine. The next big news from here is going to be Claire Coutinho. Now, this to me is significant. She is a very junior, currently a junior education minister, but it looks like, well, because she's gone in after Grant Shapps, it looks like she may become the new Net Zero Secretary. That gives a seat at the cabinet table, an absolutely copper-bottomed Rishi Sunak loyalist, someone who was early on supporting him last year in the leadership campaign, resigned over Boris Johnson, is aged just 38. Don't forget, Mr. Sunak himself is in his early 40s, so this to me is indicative maybe of a shift in generations as we go towards the election. Claire Coutinho is in number 10 now, talking to the PM. Looks like she may well be made the next Net Zero Secretary. And I wonder whether we're starting to see the shape of a team that will help Rishi Sunak take on Keir Starmer in the next election. Only a thought, but it looks like that might be what's happening right now.
Mark Francois, you know Claire Coutinho better than any of us. She is clearly very bright, she's new, but again, she's very, very closely associated with the Prime Minister.
She is. You're quite right, she's very bright. I think one of the challenges she's going to have is there's a great deal of disquiet on the Conservative backbenches about what you might call the absolute zealotry within some elements of the government and the civil service about net zero. So I think she's going to have to persuade Tory backbenchers. You know, the Prime Minister talked about taking a sort of balanced and proportionate approach. Well, let's see if Claire Coutinho can actually deliver on that, because a lot of Tory backbenchers think, you know, we are putting on a hair shirt whilst lots of other countries are not, and are now benefiting competitively, to our disadvantage.
It's not just Tory MPs concerned about it. So everybody watching this programme, I would argue, Mark, and listening, shares that concern. And we've got the Foreign Secretary cleverly in China talking to the Chinese, who are belching out pollution into the atmosphere, opening coal-fired power stations at a rate of knots, while little England, little UK, is whacking all these green levies on our
we're
energy
responsible
bills.
for about 1% of total global emissions, and by definition, it's a global problem. China's over 30%. The other major emitters are the United States and India. That doesn't mean we've got no responsibility, but we could close down the entire British economy and go and live in caves, which I think is what some of these people would like, and it wouldn't scratch what China is doing. No. So we do need to do this in a proportionate and sensible way. We should put that deadline for scrapping new petrol and diesel cars back to 2035. Which the EU have done. Francois says, why don't we copy the EU? Who knew, right? So I think it's going to be a real challenge for Claire in actually carrying Tory MPs and the public with her, because if we go flying over the top on net zero, the electorate won't thank us for it.
No. Go back to the Defence Secretary. Mark Francois worded it very carefully when he said he's got a steep learning curve, big challenge ahead. Is it possible for him to get to grip with this job quick enough when we've got war in Ukraine, the worst conflict in Europe since the Second World War?
Well, it's certainly possible, but it's going to be very tough. There are a myriad of challenges, not just the war in Ukraine. I go back to the original point. You know, I think the defence brief, out of all the cabinet posts, really needs someone in there who's willing to fight tooth and nail to ensure that they get an increase in budget, because what you've seen, and it's not just this government, successive governments since the Cold War have been quite happy to salami slice defence, because that's the one area they feel, you know, they can prioritise domestic spending over defence, and, you know, they can repackage it and make it look like they're investing in modern technologies and the like. But the fact is, you know, defence needs a very big shot in the arm. It got a bit more out of Ben Wallace, but the fact is that just fills a black hole.
So I do believe we should spend more on defence, particularly with the war in Ukraine. But there's a big issue about what we get in return for that money. We now spend about £50 billion a year on defence. And if you compare us to other people, we don't get the same amount of combat power for that money that other people do. So there are massive inefficiencies within the Ministry of Defence, and they have to be tackled. So, yes, we should spend more on defence, but the first thing we should do is spend the money we've already got far more effectively than we do. Let's see what Grant Shapps is made of on that.
Do we know why Ben Wallace stepped down?
He didn't get the NATO job.
But that wasn't the responsibility of Rishi Sunak, was it?
Yeah, but he's done his time. And he's going to stand up in Parliament at the next election.
So is he going to be one of many MPs who've stepped down before the next election because they're going to lose their seats?
Well, he won't lose his seat.
Ship.
He's got a pretty safe seat. But I think he just thinks he's been Defence Secretary for a long time. He wanted to be NATO General Secretary, blocked by the flipping Yanks who meant to be our key allies. And I think he thinks, I've done it.
I think, to be fair, being the Secretary of State for Defence, particularly with Ukraine, is an immense responsibility. Absolutely. He was the Security Minister before that. That's an immense... I think he said, you know, for the first time in 6 or 7 years, I won't have to sleep with 3 phones by my bed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's been a brilliant Defence Secretary. I think he's stood his watch, and I think he's going to be a hell of a job for Grant Shapps to follow.
Yeah. He's gone for a quieter life. You haven't had a quiet life recently, particularly you and your wife, I believe, were stuck in this airport chaos. What happened, Mark?
Well, very quickly, we were trying to get back from Italy on Monday afternoon. We saw that, there's a problem with air traffic control. Then a couple of hours later, we just get a message from Ryanair, it would be Ryanair, saying your flight is cancelled. And, you know, so I declare an interest, as it were.
Were you at the airport already? Were you
No.
Did you say, do you know who I am? Is that what you mean by declared an interest?
No, I absolutely did not. No, you couldn't.
A bit.
Because ministers were saying, I think in good faith, contact your airline. Yeah. Unless you had powers of telepathy, you couldn't do that.
They're saying contact your MP.
Well, I've already started to get emails from constituents who've been similarly affected.
Yeah.
I'm sure lots of MPs will find the same. People are rightfully very angry. Look, on Monday, any concept of customer service from the British airline industry fell off its horse and died. Right? Tens of thousands of passengers were affected, not just us. They've been treated appallingly. Many of them have had hardly any communication from their airline at all, who were supposed to get you home.
Not a person to talk to.
Yeah, right.
No human being.
Websites crashing, apps that didn't work. A lot of people have then had to, some people have had to get home for work or personal reasons. They've had to book whatever flights they could get. The best we could do was to come home from Italy via Amsterdam. Yesterday we got home very late. Thousands of people have had a similar experience. The airlines have been beyond rubbish on this, and the CAA has said that people should be fully compensated. I've got their official statement here. They absolutely should do. 3 things should happen. 1, there should be an immediate inquiry into what went wrong so it can never happen again. NATS should be panned for this. Secondly, anyone that hasn't been contacted by their airline so far should certainly be contacted today. And thirdly, the airlines should assure people that if they've had to make alternative arrangements, as the CAA are saying, they should be fully compensated.
And just briefly before we go, even if it just people watching think, my God, even an MP couldn't get any sense or any communication out of an airline. What hope?
Well,
the rest of us?
there was no question of trying, as you said, like Arthur, you said, do you know? You couldn't contact these people at all.
But, Mark, this is the issue. The 4th thing I would add to your list is that companies have to seriously consider whether they're so reliant on digital technology or whether they should have people at the end of the phones, human beings, because a lot of the time all those angry people just needed to vent at somebody and then just find out what's going on.
No, I think that's absolutely, if I may say so, as someone who was in that situation, I think what you've just said is absolutely right.
Human beings, bring them back. I know, old-fashioned. Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary shared a statement on social media earlier this week. This is what he had to say.
Am I a heck?
Teams at every airport and here in the Ops Centre doing everything we can to minimise the delays, the cancellations to flights. We hope by the end of today, Tuesday, that from tomorrow we'll be running a normal operation, 3,200 flights with minimal delays. But please bear with us. We understand how inconvenient and how difficult it is for you if you're caught in one of these flight cancellations or flight delays. It is sadly outside of our control. We have been in contact with UK NATS. We still haven't had an explanation from them what exactly caused this failure yesterday and where were their backup systems. You know, it's not acceptable that UK NATS simply allow their computer systems to be taken down and everybody's flights get cancelled.
Quick summary, nothing to do with me, Ray. I just run Ryanair.
Yeah, quite. Mark Francois, Mark White, pair of marks this morning. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for kicking us off.
Mark, you'll come and see us again. I hope you're coming next week.
The government has announced that the inquiry into the Lucy Letby murders will be made statutory.
This means judges will be given power to compel witnesses to give evidence at the hearings to ensure no one can shy away from the inquiry.
So joining us now is the Head of Abuse Law and Public Inquiries at Slater and Gordon, Richard Scorer. Hi, Richard. I know you work with some of the families. I think we spoke to you last week, didn't we, a week before? Good news, as far as the families must be concerned, I imagine, that this takes the investigation to a much more serious level, giving more powers to the judge.
Yeah, this is exactly where we needed to be. It's a very welcome announcement. We said from the outset, and the families said from the outset, that we needed an inquiry within these powers, and we've now got that, so it's very welcome news.
Oh, I think we've... have we lost... Oh, he's there.
Still got
Richard is there.
Richard, the argument against, which was originally put forward by the Prime Minister, was, oh, it can take too long. It's much quicker if you avoid going down the statutory route. But this isn't about speed, is it? It's about getting to the nub of what went wrong and preventing it happening again, and maybe also exposing some of the people who put the reputational damage of the hotel before the rights of the people who were concerned that children were being murdered.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. This is about having a thorough inquiry which gets the answers and does a thorough job of investigation. But, I mean, on your point, I don't actually accept that a statutory inquiry needs necessarily to be longer. I mean, much depends on the quality of the chair, the way in which the inquiry is organised. And, of course, the great benefit of a statutory inquiry is that it doesn't need to get into endless negotiations with institutions and with witnesses about whether they attend, whether they cooperate, because it's got the powers to compel them. So I think actually, an inquiry can happen reasonably expeditiously, providing it's set up quickly and providing it's well run.
Richard, what about the sentencing reforms as well that we heard about, we're hearing about this morning, about the fact that the guilty party will now have to go to court to sit there to hear the sentencing, and there'll be more powers to make them do so. Just your response to that?
Well, I welcome it. I think it's a necessary change in the law. It's important to give judges in this situation a range of powers that they can use, and sometimes that will involve requiring the defendant to come into the courtroom and using reasonable force to achieve that. Sometimes there may be other penalties that can be applied, for example, in terms of prison privileges or a lengthier sentence. But we need to give judges the powers to do this. The judge in the Letby case was clear that he didn't have the power to force her to come into the courtroom. Judges need to have those powers, so I very much welcome a change on this.
And Richard, I think the families you represented would have wanted that in the first place with Letby.
They absolutely would have done, and I've seen this in a number of cases. I was involved in representing victims of the Manchester Arena bombing, and in that case, Hashim Abedi, the brother of the bomber, who was also convicted of very serious offences and is now serving a very long jail term, again refused to appear in court, and that was something that was very distressing for the victims.
Okay.
So, happen in a number of cases.
All right, thank you, Richard. Richard Scorer there. We are going to be talking about this as well this morning. We're going to be discussing that. You and I have quite different opinions on whether that is the right thing to do. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A bright start for some on this final day of August. Damp for others. Rain is pushing northeastwards, not making it feel particularly summer-like on this final day of meteorological summer. That rain lingering across Northern Ireland into Wales, the Midlands, southern parts of England by lunchtime. Scotland and northeast England faring best for dry and bright weather, some sunny spells, just the odd shower by the afternoon. And it's going to feel warm enough in the sunshine with light winds, 18 to 21 Celsius, disappointingly cool through Northern Ireland, northwest England into the Midlands, 16, 17 Celsius, for example. Then, as that band of rain pushes into northern England and parts of southwest Scotland, it fizzles away, but another pulse of activity arrives into the southwest and then trundles along the south coast through the early hours of tomorrow, with some heavy downpours expected with this. Quite a humid night, actually. Certainly higher temperatures compared with recent nights in the south. Still quite fresh across Scotland, where we keep the clear skies, and a beautiful start here. Plenty of sunshine first thing. The area of fizzling rain is still there across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. A few heavy showers develop across North Wales, but the more persistent wet weather clears away from the southeast England, only to be replaced by further heavy showers into the afternoon. But into the weekend, the promise of high pressure and drier weather for all.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
A.m. on Thursday, the 31st of August. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce.
So, number 10 has announced Grant Shapps is the new Defence Secretary. That's right, Grant Shapps, who knows nothing about defence. This comes after Ben Wallace formally resigned from the position early this morning. We're going to be bringing lots of updates from number 10 as they happen.
Sacked on the spot. A new strategy to tackle misconduct in the police force means that rogue officers can be dismissed immediately.
Cowardly killers to court. Judges are to be given powers to force offenders to attend their sentencing. And now the Lucy Letby inquiry is to be made statutory, which means judges will have the power to force witnesses to testify.
And American nukes in Britain. US nuclear weapons could be heading to the UK. But where will they be based, and could they put you at risk?
That nuclear one's crept under the radar, hasn't it? Because it's going to be, if it happens, US fighter planes armed with nuclear weapons in a certain part of England. When was that debated in Parliament?
It hasn't been.
Passed me by.
And actually, it hasn't made it to a lot of other media outlets, actually, which I think is why it's kind of important that we talk about it.
Certainly is.
These have been nuclear weapons under American control on our soil, not under our control. And of course, does that render us a target to Russia, for example? So let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, here is the very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Grant Shapps has been appointed Defence Secretary following Ben Wallace's resignation from the post. Mr Wallace said last month he'd resign from the role at the next reshuffle after 4 years in the job. In his resignation letter, he says the Ministry of Defence is back on the path to being once again world-class. Mr Wallace says he wants to explore different opportunities and spend more time with his family after 8 years of ministerial duties. Meanwhile, Education Minister Claire Coutinho was seen entering number 10 after Mr Shapps, with his energy role expected to be filled. She's been in her role since October last year. Police officers will be automatically dismissed if they are found guilty of gross misconduct under new government plans. Senior officers will have more powers to sack rogue staff and be able to dismiss those who fail vetting checks. The government says the changes could be implemented as soon as next spring. Policing Minister Chris Philp told GB News the rules will strengthen the policing system.
It'll make removal for gross misconduct automatic. It will make sure that specified criminal offences will automatically lead to misconduct, and it will streamline and speed up the process for removing officers either guilty of or accused of misconduct, or indeed of poor performance as well. And there will be nowhere for them to hide, and I think that will help, as you say, rebuild public confidence in policing.
Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry says despite the new plans, the government still isn't doing enough.
I think that this is something which should have happened a long time ago, and I think that the crisis in public confidence in the police, particularly amongst women, is something that is an absolute tragedy, because our policing system needs to work on the basis of consent and being able to work with the public. And if the public loses confidence in the police, they simply can't do their job properly. We believe that, for example, what the government have announced today just doesn't go far enough. So if someone is accused of rape or domestic violence, they simply shouldn't be a police officer. They should be suspended until that case has been sorted out.
At least 70 people have died and more than 40 have been injured in a fire in Johannesburg. A multi-storey building caught fire in South Africa's biggest city in the early hours of this morning, with a toddler reportedly among those killed. Emergency services say the death toll is likely to rise as the search and rescue operation gets underway. Some MPs have called for changes to drug laws, recommending testing at festivals and supervised safe spaces for users. The report by the Home Affairs Committee suggests piloting in Glasgow and advocates for amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act. The Chief Constable of Northern Ireland is due to attend a critical meeting with the policing board that could determine his future in the post. A recent court ruling deemed Simon Byrne's disciplinary actions against 2 junior officers unlawful. The decision was reportedly driven by concerns Sinn Féin might withdraw support for policing, sparking accusations of appeasement from unionists. But the party says there's no threat. Around 121,000 patients died while waiting for an NHS treatment in England last year. That's according to the Labour Party, which gathered data from all NHS trusts. It suggests people are in pain while waiting for care, with 7.6 million still on the waiting list at the end of June. That's up from 7.5 million in May. The government says cutting waiting lists is one of the Prime Minister's key priorities. And car production has seen an increase of almost a third last month compared to a year ago. More than 76,000 cars were built, making it the 6th consecutive month of growth. It comes as the industry recovers from shortages of supplies such as semiconductors. More than 4 in 5 cars made were shipped overseas, with the EU, US and China among the top destinations. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News now. It's back to Andrew and Beth.
Well, it was the worst kept secret this morning in politics because Number 10 has confirmed that Grant Shapps is now on his 5th ministerial job. He's the new Defence Secretary. Our political editor at GB News, Chris Hope, joins us live from Westminster. Chris, morning to you. Grant Shapps, he's a pretty good media operator, isn't he? Pretty good in TV and radio interviews.
Yeah.
A surprise in this job in the sense he's never done it before. He doesn't know the defence industry at all, and we are in the thick of the worst military conflict involving this country since the Second World War.
That's right, it's his 5th job in a year, Andrew. It's been quite a lot of upheaval in the building behind me, 10 Downing Street. It's been a difficult time, but I think he thinks clearly Rishi Sunak thinks he's a safe pair of hands who can do this job and do a good job for the government. He's somebody who's trusted. He's come from being Net Zero Secretary. He was Trade Secretary, Business Secretary. He's definitely a good media operator. When he was the Transport Secretary, he bought his own Union Jack to put behind him on those Zoom calls when he was trying to communicate to the rest of the world from his home in Welwyn Garden City. So no, he's definitely a trusted pair of hands. What's as interesting, I think, is who might replace him. It looks like it could well be Claire Coutinho, aged 38, a junior education minister, and that to me says there's a shift changing here, a generational shift maybe in the new face of the Tory party. If Claire Coutinho is made Net Zero Secretary, that is the start maybe of the PM, Mr Sunak, creating a team to try and show the country that the Tories deserve another term in government after the next election.
But I wonder if it ever really does that, Christopher. I just wonder whether people at home really care whether Claire Coutinho or Grant Shapps are in these particular positions. I think we might feel it's a bit like changing seats on the Titanic right now. It's probably not going to make any difference, and people can't pay their bills. We've got fuel bills going up again this winter. We can't get treatment on the NHS. How does Rishi Sunak balance those needs of creating a good government whilst also reassuring the public that he's got everything in hand?
You raise a good point. I mean, you're right to say that Claire Coutinho shouldn't really matter to anyone really outside of the Westminster bubble. I find it interesting, I think, that he's gone down a generation to loyal allies to him as he beds in for the election. That's the kind of political point I think might be quite interesting. But I totally get it. I think on the wider scheme, the big issue is inflation, which the Treasury expecting to be around 6% by November. No tax cuts planned then. Tax cuts planned next March. So we're going to be sort of trying to creep through this winter with a difficult outlook for many families, millions of families really. That's hard for them. But I think we are waiting to see an idea of sunny up plans, and Tories tell me they want to see some idea of getting those don't knows turned into actual votes for the Tory party. We're looking at maybe a proper bigger reshuffle after the party conference in mid-October, around the time of what will be a very difficult mid-Bedfordshire by-election.
Yeah, OK. Thanks, Christopher.
I think actually there should have been a major reshuffle because people going into the party conference, they should have their new briefs.
Oh, yeah.
And you know,
always have your new briefs when you go to a conference, shouldn't you, Andrew?
And if there's an election in May, you want cabinet ministers well briefed, read into the job. Now, we're going to talk now to Sir Bob Neill, who is the chairman of the Commons Justice Select Committee and was with you only a few days ago in Bromley.
He was with me in Bromley, weren't you, Bob? That's your constituency. In fact, Sir Bob Neill.
Good to see you again. Good to see you, Andrew.
Lovely to see you. He bought me a coffee on Bromley High Street the other day.
That's why she's been raving about you, Sir Bob. She says he bought me a coffee, a cappuccino, pitch perfect.
It was a proper cappuccino too, I promise.
Very good.
Now, Sir Bob, you've known Grant Shapps a long time. I've known Grant Shapps a long time. Nobody doubts he's competent, he's experienced. But an interesting appointment, bearing in mind what's happening in Ukraine, a very serious military conflict, the most serious involving Britain and NATO since the Second World War. He's never done the job before. Isn't this Rishi putting one of his mates in the job rather than perhaps somebody who's better qualified, like Heapy, who's the Deputy Defence Minister, or that rather celebrated soldier, Tom Tugendhat, who's on the Tory ministerial ranks?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Andrew? I mean, you know, quite often reshuffles don't throw up the obvious candidate.
Yeah.
And quite often the people who are most talked of don't get the job for whatever reason. I mean, I've worked with Grant. He was a minister in the Department of Communities and Local Government when I was a minister there as well. And he certainly, as you said, he's very good on the media, and he's very adaptable. He's bright. He picks up the brief quickly. You're certainly right, he's close to the Prime Minister. It may be that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary see them, perhaps they're going to be the main drivers of the relationship with Ukraine in particular, and the war. There is an argument maybe sometimes that you need somebody perhaps a bit from outside the defence world to take a step back. You know, always by the nature of it, people can be very experienced in defence. But one of the things I think a lot of people have said to me, I've never been in the Defence Ministry, so it's only anecdotal, is that sometimes, particularly on the things like procurement, getting the best value for money and so on, maybe somebody who's perhaps more of a business approach, a fresh pair of eyes can be very valuable sometimes. So maybe that's part of the thing.
Our viewers have been getting in touch, Bob, this morning, and Jacqueline has said, I can't believe the government have moved Grant Shapps to yet another department that he doesn't know anything about. Andy's saying, while wishing Mr Shapps well, I wonder what his military service experience actually is. Is this another example of the Conservative cabinet having a familiar face in place rather than one who has experience and first-hand knowledge? It's interesting what you say there about defence. Maybe you're best to be a little bit removed from it. But I'm thinking about all of the departments. Most people have had experience of the NHS, of the transport, of education. We might have a little sort of understanding of what people need. But when it comes to defence, maybe it is the department where you do need some specific experience and understanding.
I think there's arguments that go both ways. In truth, we've had effective defence secretaries who did have a military background of one service or the other. Equally, I can think under both Conservative and Labour governments of effective defence secretaries who weren't. So it's a perfectly valid point to make either way. I'm perfectly happy to trust the Prime Minister's judgment on this, and having worked with Grant, as I say in the past, he gets on top of the brief very quickly, and he certainly works very hard. So I'd wish him well, and be interesting if Claire Coutinho does go to the net zero job. She certainly will be a really good appointment. She's my near neighbour. It's just the other side of Biggin Hill, where we were talking about yesterday. Bev, her constituency starts, and I mean she's really bright, really able, and I think that a place of a bright young woman would be a good thing. But also, she'd be doing it on merit because she's really up to stuff. She was the Prime Minister's parliamentary aide, her PPS, when he was Chancellor, if you remember.
Yes.
So she's worked with him in the past.
And Bob, you talk about the Prime Minister today. He's made a very important announcement. I think most people, not my colleague here, Bev Turner, will be cheering. He's saying that rancid killers like Lucy Letby, let's be clear what she is, will be compelled to be in the dock to hear their sentence and to hear witness statements, as opposed to cowering in the cells below. I think that's really good news, and he's enabling prison officers or court attendants to use, quote, reasonable force to enable it to happen.
I think that's a perfectly sensible move. I mean, we have to be realistic and accept that there will be certain circumstances where maybe the judge will decide that it's not appropriate to have someone brought up because they might try and hijack the proceedings and disrupt it. That happened, if you remember, with the dreadful terrorists who murdered Rosalia Lee Rigby.
Yeah.
But subject to that, subject to the fact that the judge ultimately must always have the discretion, it's right to give both the judge and the prison service more, if you like, more tools in the toolbox to try and insist that these people are brought up into court to face the music, and in particular, so that I think the victims' families can sort of see the whites of their eyes, if you like, when they're sentenced. So whenever possible, that really ought to be the objective.
Bob, as you mentioned, I was with you a couple of days ago when ULEZ was expanded into your constituency. How has it been since? What are you hearing from people on the ground there who are getting in touch with you about their experience of that?
Well, massive anger, Bev. This really is something which has outraged people to a degree that you don't often see in things which happen in local government and transport sort of areas of policy. If you remember, after we spoke in Bromley High Street, where I think pretty much everyone was against it, I went down to Biggin Hill, which is a town surrounded by a green belt. And they were telling me already that people are not coming into the shops there. People sometimes drive up from just over the border in Kent, come into places like Biggin Hill and to Bromley. We've got an RAF museum at Biggin Hill, very famous, and we're very proud of it. You know, every person that rang up yesterday to inquire about coming to visit the RAF museum at Biggin Hill said, sorry, we're not going to be able to do it now that we've got the ULEZ. So that museum is going to struggle now for people to come in. That's just one example. I have an 80-odd-year-old saying, look, I just cannot afford to change my car. I'm not to be able to get out so much.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an absolute outrage.
Yeah,
and here's a supposed socialist mayor hitting some of the lowest paid in society.
Just briefly, Bob, a lot of people have been vandalising these cameras. They've been obscuring them, they've been cutting the wires or removing them altogether. We've talked to some of your colleagues who say we don't condone it, but we understand why people are doing it. What's your view?
Well, I mean, obviously, I could never condone breaking the law. That's never right. But I do understand the frustration and the anger. And I did happen to notice in some parts of Bromley, there are very few operative cameras because people have done that. And I think that just demonstrates that even though, of course, you must abide by the law, it demonstrates just how much people feel that this has been imposed upon them without any proper consultation, and by a mayor I doubt has scarcely ever set foot in Bromley during his term in office, doesn't understand outer London. They have a real sense of frustration that they're simply not being listened to by the person who takes the key decisions. So I can understand where they come from, even though people, of course, don't do it.
Thank you, Bob. So, Bob, Neil there, you know, I just want to provide a little balance on that topic. There was one mother that came up to me on Bromley High Street who said she'd given up her job. She set up a charity called Greener and Cleaner in order to devote her life to this, and she was applauding Sadiq Khan for what he'd done.
Well, I'm very suspicious of the science by which he's imposing stealth. Bob Neal, of course, who is MP for Chislehurst and Bromley.
So we've been mentioning this morning about the fact that we've got this change in the law. So Andrew and I, it's not that I don't agree with this, the idea that criminals who've been found guilty should hear their sentencing. I'm just not sure in actuality how you make it happen without putting prison officers at risk of being hurt.
No, don't be namby-pamby, Bev. You force them. You force them, you chain them, you chain their feet, you chain their hands, get them up there.
Well, let's get a reaction from international human rights lawyer David Hay. Good morning, David.
Hi, good morning to you both.
Good morning, good to see you again. How do you get prisoners, the guilty party, into the court without putting anybody else's safety at risk?
Well, I think, Bev, I would agree with you here. I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the problems that you're going to see, unless you want to see similar things to... so I'm getting very bad feedback in my head. So unless you want to see Hannibal Lecter-type scenes, you're going to have a real problem. And like you said, you're going to have put people at risk, whether it's the prison officer and people actually in the court. So if you imagine someone that doesn't want to be taken in a sentence, who already has a full life sentence, who has nothing to lose, that person can become violent and abusive. And is that something we want to see play out in our courts? Effectively, giving these criminals the last word on their evil deeds. I just don't think it's the right thing to do. Having said that, I do think giving the power to judges to consider all the facts and see if it's in the interest of justice, that's a good step, but I do worry about the practicality.
But, David, there are powers they can use to compel even people like Letby, who got a whole life sentence. So her parents faithfully turned up at court every day. There are reports that her family and her parents are going to move closer to the prison. Well, the message would go down from me if I was a judge saying, if Letby's not coming into the witness box, into the dock, to hear sentencing, to hear the witness statements, she's having no visits. I've discussed it with the governor for 2 years. She would be up there like a shot.
Well, it may be. I mean, it's very difficult, I think, to get into the heads of these terrible criminals and people that have done such evil acts. But I do think it was right to give the judges that power. I mean, the thing to mention is that, in a way, that power does already exist. So the governors have, the judge at the moment could say to a governor of a prison, bring this person, and then it's the decision of the governor whether they can use reasonable force, etc. Now, obviously, governors, as I think I mentioned before, have a lot of other considerations to deal with. But you're eventually passing that power to the judges. But still, it's a very complex area, because even at the time of these horrific acts and people getting justice, they may want this person dragged to court. Is that a lasting image that they want if this person is violent? If we all imagine a Hannibal Lecter-style person sitting in court, bound and gagged, is that a lasting image that we want?
David, it's fine by me. Absolutely.
I understand. I think...
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter was a monster in that in the film.
Silence of the Lambs.
Lucy Letby is a monster. Sorry, treat her like one. If she won't do the right thing in court and comply with the court rules, treat her the same.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that the other thing that we should be looking at as well is that this law, although they've said that they are changing rules, when is the legislation actually going to happen to enable this? And bearing in mind the government is pretty much, on the way out in terms of at least towards a general election, are we ever going to see this? Or is it just a case of basically either political party politicizing pain, fear, and getting people's support? Yeah. And that's the worry here, and that's what I think it is. I mean, I can't see this ever put into legislation before and been in effect.
Yeah. Human rights lawyer David Hay, lovely to see you again. And do you know what also surprises me is we've been talking about this only for a matter of days, and they've changed the law and it's supposed to be happening. Well, it's what they can do when they think it's going to win over public.
It'll have to go through Parliament, but they could do it in one line. Yeah. But what they'll have is problems in the House of Lords with the lawyers, the unelected lawyers in the House of Lords, who will challenge it. But if there's all-party support, if they put it in the King's Speech, it's then part of... they can then use what they call the Parliament Act if the House of Lords mess around with it, and they can just pass it, push it through. It should be through immediately.
I think it's like presuming that the person who's just been found guilty, the murderer or whatever, has any sort of empathy that it's going to make any difference if they hear what they've done. If you're a psychopathic baby killer, you're a bit short on empathy anyway. You can sit there and talk to them. But they're not going to get it.
But you want your visits, you want your privileges, you want to be able to walk around the exercise yard.
I'm on board with that.
You want your fags, you want your money. You're not getting any of that,
no mobile phone
in my court. No, certainly no mobile phone.
Right, still to come this morning, we're going to be having more on the police being handed greater powers to sack rogue officers. This is very controversial, we are. GB News, Britain's news channel.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A bright start for some on this final day of August. Damp for others. Rain is pushing northeastwards, not making it feel particularly summer-like on this final day of meteorological summer. That rain lingering across Northern Ireland into Wales, the Midlands, southern parts of England by lunchtime. Scotland and northeast England faring best for dry and bright weather, some sunny spells, just the odd shower by the afternoon. And it's going to feel warm enough in the sunshine with light winds, 18 to 21 Celsius, disappointingly cool through Northern Ireland, northwest England into the Midlands, 16, 17 Celsius, for example. Then, as that band of rain pushes into northern England and parts of southwest Scotland, it fizzles away, but another pulse of activity arrives into the southwest and then trundles along the south coast through the early hours of tomorrow, with some heavy downpours expected with this. Quite a humid night, actually. Certainly higher temperatures compared with recent nights in the south. Still quite fresh across Scotland, where we keep the clear skies, and a beautiful start here. Plenty of sunshine first thing. The area of fizzling rain is still there across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. A few heavy showers develop across North Wales, but the more persistent wet weather clears away from the southeast England, only to be replaced by further heavy showers into the afternoon. But into the weekend, the promise of high pressure and dry weather for all.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 10:28. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Claire Coutinho.
I'm not familiar with Claire Coutinho.
I know her a bit. She is a young MP. She's 38. She's replaced Grant Shapps as Energy Secretary. Her family came here from India in the 1970s. They're of Goan descent, so she'll be almost certainly a Christian. So she is a very close chum of the Prime Minister's, as is Grant Shapps. She was his parliamentary private secretary. So I think she was a junior defence minister. So that's a big jump for her. And it seems to me like that Rishi Sunak is getting ready to surround himself with his people in the run-up to next election. We'll get a much bigger reshuffle around the time of the Tory conference.
OK, well, in a way, you would hire the people you know and you trust and you like, fair enough. But also, is it just surrounding himself with yes men and nobody challenges him?
Well, I would have given the Defence Secretary job to somebody who knows something about defence, bearing in mind we're in a major war. And by the way, the Deputy Defence Minister, James Heappey, is a former Army officer.
Well, there you go. Now, police officers found guilty of gross misconduct will be automatically dismissed under new plans announced by the government.
It's part of a raft of reforms which includes enhanced vetting and misconduct hearings, which will be chaired by chief constables.
So joining us now is Shabnam Chowdhury, a former detective superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. Hi, Shabnam. Good to see you again. This slightly worries me. Doesn't it mean we're taking out any checks and balances within a police station? What do I mean? I don't mean a police station. Within a police force or within a constabulary. That's what I was looking for. Whereby, if somebody has done something, it's up to one person, presumably, to sack them. Doesn't that mean that individuals are vulnerable to maybe personal grudges or an opinion on what is right and wrong behaviour?
It definitely will have some gaps in it, and it definitely needs some serious checks and balances. They have announced that they will have an independent legal chair who's qualified to independently scrutinise and oversee those hearings and the actual final decision in terms of sacking. But what they need in that is, doesn't matter if you've got someone that's independent, they've got to have the confidence and they've got to have the courage to say that they don't agree or disagree, whichever way they choose to go with it. Because with my personal experiences, I have sat with panel members in the past who have not been able to have a voice. And then when they have had a voice, they've kind of been sidelined and they'll get somebody in that does agree with them. I do actually agree that they should have this automatic sacking for officers for gross misconduct. You've got to look at people like Adam Proven, David Carrick, Wayne Couzens, all three of those officers. And I think that Wayne Couzens, when he pleaded guilty, they stopped his pay. They didn't actually sack him. But these officers are corrupt, rogue, sexual predators, whatever it is that they are, criminality that they're involved in, sit there for 2 years while they're under investigation, suspended on full pay. And something around that has got to change. I know that the Police Federation of England and Wales don't agree with it, because I do also feel, in my experience, that there will be those senior officers who are not necessarily independent or impartial. And I think fundamentally the key to this is about impartiality and making sure that you are presented with the facts and you deal with the facts that are put before you when you make that decision to sack.
And is this a power, do you think, Shabnam, that the chief constables are seeking?
Well, Sir Mark Rowley did get the ball rolling in terms of this, and let's not forget Sir Mark Rowley is still in special measures, so he wants to try everything possible in order to rebuild trust and confidence and get the force out of special measures. The National Police Chiefs Council have agreed, and they fully support this new legislation for police officers, for the chief officers. But as I say, if you're going to have an independent oversight, it's got to be someone that's got the courage. I would say something else, but I can't say that online. But the courage and the confidence to be able to speak out and say, don't agree, you should not be sacking this officer, or 100% this officer needs to be sacked when they don't want to sack them.
All right, thank you, Shabnam Chowdhury there this morning. Lots more to come this morning. We're going to be talking about this new law to force criminals to attend court. But first, here's the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:33, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Grant Shapps has been appointed Defence Secretary following Ben Wallace's resignation from the post. Mr Wallace said last month he'd resign at the next reshuffle after 4 years in the job. He says he wants to explore different opportunities and spend more time with his family after 8 years of ministerial duties. Meanwhile, Claire Coutinho will take over as Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary. Police officers will be automatically dismissed if they are found guilty of gross misconduct under new government plans. Senior officers will have more powers to sack rogue staff and be able to dismiss those who fail vetting checks. The government says the changes could be implemented as soon as next spring. At least 70 people have died and more than 40 have been injured in a fire in Johannesburg. A multi-storey building caught fire in South Africa's biggest city in the early hours of this morning, with a toddler reportedly among those killed. Emergency services say the death toll is likely to rise as the search and recovery operation gets underway. And the Chief Constable of Northern Ireland is due to attend a critical meeting with the policing board that could determine his future in the post. A recent court ruling deemed Simon Byrne's disciplinary actions against 2 junior officers unlawful. The decision was reportedly driven by concerns Sinn Féin might withdraw support for policing, sparking accusations of appeasement from unionists. Sinn Féin denies any attempt at influencing the decision. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2690 and 1.1676 euros. The price of gold is £1,532.78 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,470 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
And it's 11:35, 10:35 even. We don't want to run away with ourselves, do we? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So criminals will be forced to attend sentencing hearings or face longer time in jail if they refuse to do so. That's according to a new law that will give judges and police forces more power to deliver justice to victims and their families.
Well, joining us now is campaigner and former prisoner himself, Winston Davies. Winston, this is coming on the back of a huge public backlash against Let's Be, the child killer, refusing to leave the cell below the prison to hear the sentencing and the witness statements. She's an infamous, monstrous killer. I think you were banged up for 3 years for something silly. Cannabis. Hardly in the same league. Were you in the box when the judge sentenced you?
100%, yeah. It's the right thing to do. You know, if you've committed a crime, you should stand up, take your punishment, and you do your sentence. But the problem with this law and the idea that's coming out is that if someone's been sentenced, one of these murderers, rapists, like serious, psychopaths, and they're saying that you're going to get, because I think they're threatening them to give an extra 2 years if they don't come down, is that going to be any kind of, something that's going to make them want to come? And if they don't want to come and they're going to use reasonable force, are we saying that we're going to be dragging up these people, kicking and screaming, maybe shouting abuse at the victims, maybe degrading the memories of their loved ones, into the court? And then have to take them back down, or are you going to gag them, tie them up? How far are you going to take it?
I'm going to gag them and tie them up.
Well, yeah, maybe, but I don't know whether they're going to allow it. Then you're going to have the human rights campaigners saying it's inhumane, and so how far do you take it? I mean, I think it's really important. Like the mother of the girl Corbell who was murdered last year,
Olivia Pratt-Corbell,
yeah. So. She's been, very vocal campaigning for this, and it's all about, for me, it's like keep the focus on the families and the victims. Like, if they think that's going to give them justice and it's going to give them a sense of closure, 100%, give it to them and give them, that sense of justice.
You were inside 15 years ago, I think it was,
wasn't
it?
A long time ago,
and you served about 18 months for driving a car that had cannabis in it, as Andrew said. So you hung out with some wrong-uns in there, I think it's fair to say. Was it? We were saying recently that it's become a very recent trend, this idea of not listening to your sentence. Did you meet anybody that had avoided that? And do you have any idea the reasons why?
No, I don't know. I think it is a recent thing. Maybe it's happened previously. Maybe now because of social media and that things are becoming more, open, that you're hearing more about it. But I think, and again, it's about levels. Like, people that I was away with were not at this level of, the crime.
I mean, in a sense, there was no specific victim of what you did.
No.
So there was nobody there in the court to hear you get your sentencing. If you could put yourself having been in that environment, what would that be like if there was a specific victim to a crime that you'd committed? Would you have wanted to be there or not, do you think?
It depends. I think it depends, again, on who that person is. If you're a psychopath, do you care? If you're a psychopath and your victim's there, it's for them, it's about control, isn't it? So by not coming up, they're showing control. If they're forced to come up, what are they going to be resorted to show that control? Well, again, it's the victims, the families of the victims, some way of getting the last laugh, as it were.
Some people, you could broaden this to say, prison doesn't work anyway. What's the point? You did 18 months inside. Did it work for you?
Massively.
Did it?
Yeah, listen, it was the worst and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because as a young man, I had a chip on my shoulder. I needed to learn that lesson. While I was in there, I got retrained, rehabilitated, come out, turn my life around. And, and even to this day, the business that I run is a result of the training I did there.
And what is that?
I run a heating company.
Do you?
Yeah, and I've got multiple, people working now as you start talking.
So they taught you the skill.
Yeah, and I run with it. But you've got to have that in your mind. Yeah. I decided from as soon as I went there, what am I doing here? And I want to change this, and I want to do better than this. And I don't want this to be the definition of my life.
Because some people say prison is a school for scandal, where you learn to become an even more sophisticated...
It depends what you're going to do. It depends who you are as a person. I don't think that, as it stands at the moment, it works effectively. They need more people like me going in there to help. But, yeah.
Do you talk in schools?
I do lots of... Next week I'm in a school. I'm a chairman of a charity down South London. I go into youth clubs, prisons. I try as much to give back as I can.
Yeah, Winston, thank you so much. You're welcome back any time here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really inspiring stuff. Winston Davis there. Right, still to come, we're going to be joined by Carol Malone and Sam Lister to go through the big stories of the day. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:44. You are watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We are joined in the studio now. You can hear the rustling.
That's my own.
Carol Malone is in the room, and also
That's her makeup bag.
political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister.
She wants you to think it's her important note. It's not. It's her makeup
I really
bag.
think you should actually be careful because you've had a haircut the like of which I've never seen.
I rather like.
Was the guy? Did he have thick glasses or what?
Bev Turner rather liked it. What do you think?
Well, I think it's
Feels
quite
very
a good
smart,
haircut.
Andrew. Very smart.
Well, let's talk before we get deep into some of the other stories. So we've got a new Defence Secretary. Sam, you and I have known Grant Shapps for a very long time. He's on his 5th cabinet job. Chris Hope said it was his 5th cabinet job this year.
This year?
No, 5th cabinet job.
It's not this year.
No,
is
not
it?
this year. No.
Okay.
He's never ever done defence before, and we've got in the government Tom Tugendhat, who's a distinguished former army officer.
Yeah.
The Deputy Defence Minister James Heappey, former army officer. Wouldn't one of those two have been better suited to the job? But oh, whoops, they're not Rishi Sunak's close chums.
Yeah, I mean, Grant Shapps has been very, very close to Rishi Sunak for some time. And so I think that clearly plays a part of it. I mean, I think to be fair to Prime Ministers, they need people around them who they can trust.
Yeah,
and I think that's actually, particularly when you're a year out from a general election, I think that is quite important. I think, actually, though, Grant Shapps, he was quite close to Boris as well, so it almost is, a kind of... a little bit of
his middle
bonus
name
to the Boris
is
side.
Limpet.
Yes, but he is. I mean, he's somebody who is a great communicator. He's been around a long time. He's a safe pair of hands. He's the sort of person you can send out on the morning round when there's trouble, and he will deal with it properly. And that's what I think Rishi Sunak was looking for there. Somebody who he can just trust. Get on with the job. He's not going to cause any problems for him, and I think that's probably quite a sensible
We've got a government full of blokes like him. They're to me, he's witless, I mean, like you say, he's quite talented. He's Mr. Bum on the fence guy,
isn't he?
He never comes out and says anything, radical or important. People don't want safe pairs of hands. They want someone who's going to affect change. And Grant Shapps never will, especially if he's a mate to Sunak. He's not going to do anything against the government. He's not going to distinguish himself. I think he's a wet.
And we have got this major military conflict in Ukraine.
Completely.
So you would think you want someone who may have operated a tank, fired a gun.
It's funny because Sam and I were talking, and they were saying the talk was they're going to bring back Liam Fox, which
If I had a pound for every time I've read that story.
I wonder where that came from. Possibly Liam Fox.
Hello, Liam.
Well, you're usually the one to plan stories. You do that all the time.
Yeah, listen, I like Liam, and he was a good defence secretary.
I mean, I think he's better than Shapps. I think he's got a better record than Shapps.
Yeah.
I like your frock, by the way. It's very nice.
Oh.
Thanks.
Non-sequitur.
No, it isn't. I mean, it's just very bright on screen. Looks lovely. As opposed to your hair.
Now, other stories.
Right. Other stories. We're talking about these. We're going to be talking about these sentencing.
Yeah. Now, look, Beverly and I disagree. I would drag them into court. Now, whether they look like hand or electoral or not, so be it.
You see, what worries me is this phrase, the new law says they can be brought in with reasonable force.
Yeah.
Now, if I was a criminal and I didn't want to come into the dock, I'd do a little bit of shoving of the prison officer and I'd do a bit of shouting, effing and blinding, and then I wouldn't be brought into court. So I think that's too easy. I think they should be brought kicking and screaming, manacled to the dock if they have to be, and they have to face the people whose lives they've wrecked, the families of the people they have killed or raped or whatever. They need to face it and they need to listen to what those families have to say, because currently we have a justice system that seems to expend more time and effort on the perpetrators of crime than their victims. And I think it's about time that the victims are taken into account. And even if they are kicking and screaming, and even if they are effing and blinding at the families, at least the family can look at them and say, you took my son.
Yeah.
This is what I think about you. And maybe with some people, it would have with some criminals, it might make them see. I doubt it'll have an effect on the hardened ones, but maybe it might.
I don't know, Sam. Yes, of course, in an ideal world, it would be wonderful, but you can't change how that criminal is going to feel about what they've done. There's no point.
I am a little bit
anger,
with you,
anger and that revenge. It's just not a healthy emotion to carry.
If you've been given a life sentence, for example, the penalty for resisting going to the sentencing is going to be so
fast anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to make no difference to your
don't you
time
think,
in
Sam,
prison.
the mere
really.
fact they don't want to be in there is another reason why they've got to be in there.
Yeah.
And there are sanctions which a judge can use, even if it's a full life sentence. We were talking about Letby earlier, the ghastly Letby.
Yes.
Her parents were in court every day right until the sentencing.
Yeah,
they're moving closer to the prison to be closer to her. Sorry, no visiting rights at all for a year. She'd have been in court She'd have been in there.
I think that would be a better sanction than adding on.
But that would have done it, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
Not even a sanction, but make them go.
That would have done it.
However you have to do it, make them go.
Yeah.
Because they're cowards, and it's not right that they should be able to sit in their cell while the people upstairs have to hear what's happening. They should be there.
Why do they have any rights whatsoever?
None.
What worries me, though, is that these people, I mean, we're talking here, we're not talking about kind of low-level criminals, we're talking about serious criminals, and these people do not have the same emotional response to life. You know, so we might want them to feel bad about what they've done, but, you know, you can make them stand there all day. They're not going to react to it. And I worry about the fact that they want to control the situation.
That's right.
And actually, that, to me, is more worrying. You know, they want to go up and kick it, make it all about them.
Which is what the killers of Lee Rigby did in court.
Yeah.
And then they just had to get dragged away again. So they won on the final moment. They made all the attention on it.
I'm sorry, taser them.
Andrew thinks you should taser them. You didn't go out, that you can die.
I would be a hardline prison governor and a hardline Home Secretary. They would have been tasered. The killers of Rigby would have been tasered on the spot.
I think it's probably true.
Right, shall we talk about something a little lighter, but still very controversial? This is the Spanish women's football team. You and I haven't discussed this, actually, just for reasons of timing about this. This is, of course, the footballer. Her name is Hermosa Rubiales, the Spanish FA bloke, kissed her on the podium. Everyone's heard this story. What's the latest twist in the tale, Sam?
Well, there's a video emerged of the team laughing and joking afterwards, after the incident. And, you know, some people seem to think that this means that actually... I know certainly Carol thinks that this means... this kind of proves that actually it really wasn't a kind of bad incident. I think actually, you know, certainly as a professional woman, if I can say that, you know, somebody who works in a professional environment, I think it is... You have an ability to switch into a professional mode, to... put aside any upset you may have in life and just get on with your job and get on with your day. And you may just want to think about things that have upset you later in the day. You don't have to just burst into tears at the time and, you know, have a breakdown to feel bad about something. You can put those things on hold because you are a woman who has got to a certain level in life and can control their emotions in a professional environment. And I don't think that this video actually proves that this means she, you know...
was OK
with it.
Yeah, I take issue with the fact she has said, and she didn't report this for 3 days, by the way, she didn't make a complaint for 3 days, but she said the kiss was a sexual act that left her vulnerable. This was not a sexual act. He shouldn't have done it. No. It was inappropriate. He should have said sorry afterwards. But I don't believe it was a sexual act or a sexual violation in any way, shape or form. And the fact that she was laughing about it, this was a guy, he was the president, this was probably the highlight of his career and hers, and the two of them were infused with joy and excitement, and he kissed a lot of the other girls on the cheek. He got her on the mouth. OK, it is inappropriate. When you say it out loud, it is inappropriate. However, I don't believe the guy should lose his career over it. I don't believe he should be suspended over it. I mean, his mother's gone on hunger strike because she thinks...
I know, but what? It's not his baby. He's got his mother fighting his battles. What a big crybaby. No, I'm sorry, but it's
embarrassing
absolutely...
No, but what she's doing is she's
embarrassing her son.
She is embarrassing her son. But what she's doing is she's making people look at the issue and talk about it a little bit more. And I just think, yes, OK, it wasn't the right thing to do, but this, you know, this is an insult to all the victims of sexual assault to say that that's what this was, because it really...
He's got a backstory, though, and this is, I think, what isn't coming out enough in the press. This is not his first rodeo in this area. There were a load of Spanish players who refused to play female players in the last few years because of his conduct. But I think this is the one that's broken, the straw that's broken the camel's back, I think, publicly. And you've got to ask, what was he doing in that moment? He was in a position of power, and there's no doubt he was elated and he was ecstatic and all of that. It was, you can't, in that environment where someone's won a sporting event like the World Cup, emotions are running high, but he shouldn't have kissed her on the lips.
But it was momentary.
You wouldn't kiss anyone on the lips.
No.
You wouldn't. You just wouldn't. My brother, my dad, all the men in my life that I know.
I've been for 20 years. She's tried to kiss me on the lips a million
I so
times,
haven't.
and I always say
I so haven't.
But he was getting off on the power of it. Was it sexual? We can't know.
I don't think when you kiss someone in the heat of the moment and it's seconds, I don't believe that's a sexual kiss.
It was impulsive, wasn't it?
I think it was impulsive, and yes, it wasn't the right thing to do. But I think I'm amazed that the Spanish feminist movement, which has come on to this big time. I'm amazed that they are doing this, bearing in mind that they know what sexual assault, real sexual assault is, and what it does to women. And to compare the two, I think, is a mistake. And it's
I think, clearly, you know, there are degrees. This is not a serious sexual assault. We all know that. But, you know, it is an abuse of power. And I always just think, OK, so say it was any of us, even you, Andrew, and one of our male bosses came up to us and did that to us. How would you feel? I mean, I would feel pretty annoyed, actually.
If it was would you? If it were to happen within a second, would you?
Yeah, I really wouldn't want that to happen.
Right, we've got to move on, ladies.
Otherwise, I'll kiss you. You don't stop talking.
We're going to be talking about nuclear weapons on British soil in just a moment. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A bright start for some on this final day of August. Damp for others. Rain is pushing northeastwards, not making it feel particularly summer-like on this final day of meteorological summer. That rain lingering across Northern Ireland into Wales, the Midlands, southern parts of England by lunchtime. Scotland and northeast England faring best for dry and bright weather, some sunny spells, just the odd shower by the afternoon. And it's going to feel warm enough in the sunshine with light winds, 18 to 21 Celsius, disappointingly cool through Northern Ireland, northwest England into the Midlands, 16, 17 Celsius, for example. Then, as that band of rain pushes into northern England and parts of southwest Scotland, it fizzles away, but another pulse of activity arrives into the southwest and then trundles along the south coast through the early hours of tomorrow, with some heavy downpours expected with this. Quite a humid night, actually. Certainly higher temperatures compared with recent nights in the south. Still quite fresh across Scotland, where we keep the clear skies, and a beautiful start here. Plenty of sunshine first thing. The area of fizzling rain is still there across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. A few heavy showers develop across North Wales, but the more persistent wet weather clears away from the southeast England, only to be replaced by further heavy showers into the afternoon. But into the weekend, the promise of high pressure and drier weather for all.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 31st of August. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Change at the top. In the past hour, Claire Coutinho is named the new Energy Secretary. She replaces Grant Shapps, who's become the Defence Secretary following the resignation of Ben Wallace.
Sacked on the spot, a new strategy to tackle misconduct in the police force means rogue officers can be dismissed immediately.
Cowardly killers to court. Judges will be given powers to force offenders to attend their sentencing. And now, the Lucy Letby inquiry will be made statutory, giving it the power to force witnesses to testify.
And American nukes in Britain. US nuclear weapons could be heading to the UK, but where would they be based? Could they put you and me at risk?
Carol Malone and Sam Lister will be back in the studio as well to tackle some other big stories today, including also what Prince Harry has said in that Netflix documentary, which landed yesterday. I like to say Prince Harry just to hear Andrew Pearce's grown-up despair. First, though, here is the very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. As we've been hearing, Grant Shapps has been appointed Defence Secretary following Ben Wallace's resignation from the post. Mr Wallace said last month he'd resign from the role at the next reshuffle after 4 years in the job. In his resignation letter, he says the Ministry of Defence is back on the path to being once again world-class. Claire Coutinho will take over as Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary. Police officers will be automatically dismissed if they are found guilty of gross misconduct under new government plans. Senior officers will have more powers to sack rogue staff and be able to dismiss those who fail vetting checks. The government says the changes could be implemented as soon as next spring. Policing Minister Chris Philp told GB News the rules will strengthen the policing system.
It'll make removal for gross misconduct automatic. It will make sure that specified criminal offences will automatically lead to misconduct, and it will streamline and speed up the process for removing officers either guilty of or accused of misconduct or indeed of poor performance as well. And there will be nowhere for them to hide, and I think that will help, as you say, rebuild public confidence in policing.
While Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry says despite the new plans, the government still isn't doing enough.
I think that this is something which should have happened a long time ago, and I think that the crisis in public confidence in the police, particularly amongst women, is something that is an absolute tragedy, because our policing system needs to work on the basis of consent and being able to work with the public. And if the public loses confidence in the police, they simply can't do their job properly. We believe that, for example, what the government have announced today just doesn't go far enough. So if someone is accused of rape or domestic violence, they simply shouldn't be a police officer. They should be suspended until that case has been sorted out.
Elsewhere, more than 70 people have died and more than 40 have been injured in a fire in Johannesburg. A multi-storey building caught fire in the South African city in the early hours of this morning, with the toddler reportedly among those killed. Emergency services say the death toll is likely to rise as the search and recovery operation gets underway. Some MPs have called for changes to drug laws, recommending testing at festivals and supervised safe spaces for users. The report by the Home Affairs Committee suggests piloting in Glasgow and advocates for amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act. The Chief Constable of Northern Ireland is due to attend a critical meeting with the policing board that could determine his future in the post. A recent court ruling deemed Simon Byrne's disciplinary actions against 2 junior officers unlawful. The decision was reportedly driven by concerns Sinn Féin might withdraw support for policing, sparking accusations of appeasement from unionists. Sinn Féin denies any suggestion of attempting to influence the matter. Around 121,000 patients died while waiting for NHS treatment in England last year. That's according to the Labour Party, which gathered data from all NHS trusts. It suggests people experience pain while waiting for care, with 7.6 million still on the waiting list at the end of June, up from 7.5 million in May. The government says cutting waiting lists is one of the Prime Minister's key priorities. Car production has seen an increase of almost a third last month compared to a year ago. More than 76,000 cars were built, making it the 6th consecutive month of growth. It comes as the industry recovers from shortages of supplies such as semiconductors. More than 4 in 5 cars made were shipped overseas, with the EU, US and China among the top destinations. And those who stayed up late last night might have been lucky enough to catch a glimpse of a rare blue supermoon. Unlike its name suggests, though, it isn't blue, but rather refers to the second full moon in one calendar month. Most months only have one full moon, and a second only happens once every 2 to 3 years. It happens as the moon appears much smaller than the sun and comes closer to the Earth. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Beth.
Well, to our top story this morning.
Sorry,
in the past hour, Claire Coutinho, who's a relatively new MP, has been named as the new Energy Secretary. She's replacing Grant Shapps, who's the new Defence Secretary, even though he's never done a day's work in the Department of Defence.
That's right. Ben Wallace officially handed in his resignation earlier this morning after 4 years at the helm of the Ministry of Defence.
And across now to GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins us live from Westminster. Chris, Claire Coutinho, big job for her. She's only 38. She's only been an MP since 2019. But like Grant Shapps, one thing she's got in common, that she's very close to the Prime Minister, who appears to be getting his mates talented, I'm sure they are talented, in Cabinet in the run-up to the election.
That's right, Andrew. The reshuffle here in number 10, such as it was, is over. 3 people have moved jobs. We see Grant Shapps come in as Defence Secretary, his 5th job in a year. Claire Coutinho, aged 38, elected in 2019, a key ally of Rishi Sunak, now in at the Cabinet from being a very junior Education Minister as Net Zero Secretary. And David Johnston, also elected in 2019, in Education. These 3 MPs, all in the south of England, no one near the Red Wall. So a penny for the thoughts of Red Wall MPs who may think that they want to get some kind of promotion looking into the election. I think she's a key ally, no question, but one might wonder whether the PM should be doing a bigger reshuffle looking into the election, and the rumour is that may well happen in October, on or around the time of the Tory party conference. But as things stand, the busyness in number 10 is over for the day.
All right, that's Chris Hope, our political editor. Joined in the studio by Khalid Mahmood, the Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr. We could talk to you at length about the reshuffle. I'd rather talk to you about the ultra-low emission zone, because that has gone off very, very badly in Greater London. We've seen hundreds of cameras vandalised, cables cut. You've got a version of the ultra-low emission zone in Birmingham, £12.50 here in London and the South East. It's £8 or £9.
£8 in Birmingham.
And does it work? Are you a great supporter?
I'm not a supporter because it was put in without the proper information being given out. Again, this sort of blackmailing figure of how many deaths there are of children was used, which I challenged, and I managed to get evidence both from the House of Commons Library and the government figures in relation to what it was. And this has just become a thought police. If somebody mentions these sort of things, you can't challenge them. And it's really something that we've got to look at seriously. And the effect it has on working people, not even poor people, working people who can't change those vehicles to do that. And millions, over £50 million in Birmingham alone at least, has been paid over. But they've had to give about appeals in terms of 80% of appeals that were made, they've had to repay as well.
Why on the appeals?
What a mess.
What basis? Because they didn't know they were in the ultra-low emission zone?
Mostly because it depends on what year the car is.
Right.
But it doesn't... they could be the same engine made in a different year. So if you pass December is an arbitrary date. The cars are registered when they're made. So if it passes December, then you can still be under the same engine,
And
so it doesn't matter.
There's also been the problem with cloning of vehicles. This is why a lot have had to been paid back. I think it was since October last year, there were about 10,000 tickets issued to cars which had been cloned. So in other words, somebody had copied the reg plate and put false plates on their own car to get away with it.
Yeah, it's a hugely difficult issue for people to deal with. And I don't appreciate any criminal activity to do that. But there are genuine people who are struggling because this is a thought police issue. The figures are very emotional, very sentimental, but very wrong. And I challenge anybody, including Mayor Khan, to come and speak about those figures with me and see how we...
What do you make of the somersaults by the Labour leader, Keir Starmer? He's quite good at somersaults, or U-turns, you might say, because he was an enthusiastic cheerleader for the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone, Khalid, until it went horribly wrong in the by-election.
Look, he's listened and saw the issues that people are concerned about.
They didn't win the by-election.
Andrew,
he changed his mind.
He's seen how it's affected people, and he's made a right decision to say, look, we need to review this policy, let's look at it, and let's move forward. That doesn't mean the Labour Party or Sir Keir Starmer is against any issues in the environment and climate change. He supports them, but we have to look at what's applicable or not.
Sadiq Khan's not paying any attention whatsoever to the leader of the Labour Party.
Well, I think Sadiq should do, and I think that will come hopefully in the next month or so. We need to have a proper discussion with Sadiq, and he has to put in line, we're all part of the Labour Party, and he should listen to that.
There's a bit of research, apparently, that suggests that Birmingham's clear air zone has had a smaller effect on pollution than was previously thought to have done anyway. It's usually said to have reduced pollution levels by about 13%, but scientists at the University of Birmingham say that drop is only about 7%. So it's not even working in terms of cleaning the air, is it?
It doesn't actually need it. The problem was the figures they used were wrong. One of the areas in Birmingham where they said that they've dropped it, which is behind the new bull ring, it was the original nozzles were placed in the wrong. They were placed a lot lower, so you'd get much higher results. So it hasn't actually dropped. It actually has now gone back to a proper level of reading, which it should be at. And there's been a huge amount of manipulation in these figures. And I think the real issue here is not to emotionally blackmail people, but look at the real figures and see how it goes.
We've seen a lot of vandalism here. We've got vigilante groups who call themselves the...
Blade Runners.
The Blade Runners, cutting through cables, removing cameras altogether. A lot of Tory MPs we've spoken to about this, Khalid, said, of course we don't condone it, but we completely understand why they're doing it. What's your view? And is that happening in Birmingham too?
No, it hasn't happened in Birmingham.
Right.
But I think people who do this, again, nobody condones this sort of action. Criminal activity shouldn't be condoned. But I think it's a sign for the mayor to listen to people. And see what the hardships they are and how frustrated people are with this and look at it. And it doesn't really make a huge difference to the air quality. That's been proven in London, in Birmingham and anywhere else these charges exist. It's a huge tax on working people.
And have you got one of these smelly old polluting cars, Khalid, or does your car comply with the low emissions?
I had an all-electric car until it got written off by somebody hitting me in the back.
Oh, no.
Right. I was turning right and got hit. But my wife's car also is compliant as well.
OK.
Yeah. Let's talk to you about these this change in the law today that criminals found guilty will have to go to court, or judges will be given greater powers to force them to go to court to listen to their sentencing. Andrew and I feel that in an ideal world it would be great that this could happen, but I feel the practicalities of it are such that I'm not sure it ever will happen. What's your take on it?
I think it's going to be very difficult if somebody doesn't want to go, particularly in certain cases where they're into a maximum sentence. How do you force that person to go and listen? And those are the real tragedies that we're trying to address. And I think it's a very difficult issue legally to deal with. How do you force somebody to listen when they don't want to do that? Putting on a little bit on the sentence isn't going to make a huge difference to them. They are not very good people in the first place. And so I don't think they'll be bothered by it.
What about also, we hear now chief constables have been given the power to sack on the spot rogue police officers, of which we've heard far too much recently. Is that a good move?
It's a positive move in the right direction, but what the chief constables and the police departments have got to do is invest more in their HR, have proper investigations, and then dismiss people quickly. So don't just dismiss them, because you'll end up with a huge amount of tribunal issues. Yeah. But what you've got to do is have proper investigation, proper resources put into that, and HR needs investment to deal with this quickly and effectively, and that's what they should be doing.
And how is policing? What is the view of the police in Birmingham? Because the Met has had so many issues because of the killing of Sarah Everard, countless problems. Trust in policing has fallen to an all-time low, I would say, particularly among women. How is it in Birmingham and the West Midlands?
Well, not much better. I've got a constituent in my constituency who's been strip searched twice, and we're taking that to the IOPC. So there are a lot of issues in relation to officers.
A woman?
A woman.
Right.
And sort of strip searched twice under very difficult circumstances. We had to support as much as we can. I've now taken that case to the IOPC, and I think these rogue officers are going to be dealt with. Again, there are elements of the recording that is missing, and those are the real issues. Why does it go missing? And those are the questions we need answering.
Penny Mordaunt's made a suggestion today in the press that she thinks that national service should come back for 16-year-olds, just a kind of couple of weeks of it, and it should be voluntary. What do you think of that? This is one of those highly perennial topics that comes around every few years.
Well, it does always come around, but I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. I think having young people, a bit of discipline, getting up early in the morning, doing a bit of a jog and stuff, that I think all goes towards well-being and perhaps a bit more understanding of what they need to do for the future. I've got no problems with that, as long as voluntary.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. It's one of those stories that comes around and often, and I can't believe I would have thought it was a good idea, and then I had teenagers and realised it was a really good idea.
just finally, we had a very, very mini reshuffle today. Yeah. When is Keir Starmer going to reshuffle his front bench? Because it could do with it. Well,
no, I think he's in a good team at the moment, but I'm sure he will decide
in the next member of the team.
They all are. I mean, Rachel Reeves, fantastic. Pat McFadden is fantastic. You've got John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is brilliant. West Streeting at the Health Department. They're fantastic people. We've got a very good team. But obviously, if Sir Keir feels necessary, as there's been a shuffle, because this will be going to the election, maybe there might be some people that need moving, and perhaps that will happen in the next couple of weeks.
Will you be waiting by the telephone?
I don't think so. I'm quite happy where I am. Thank you very much.
Sure?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes,
that's our very nice Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood. Thanks for coming in.
Right, still to come, we're going to have the latest on American nuclear missiles potentially being stored on British soil. This is GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:20. You are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, the US Air Force has secured nearly £40 million in funding for a project which could pave the way for the return of American nuclear weapons to British soil for the first time in 15 years.
So, should we be housing American nuclear weapons again? And what does this mean for Britain? Well, joining us this morning is the former Military of Defence Head of Counter-Terrorism, Major General Chip Chapman, alongside the Defence Editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. We got the A-team today. Morning, gentlemen, to you both. What does it mean, Chip, if I can come to you? When we hear this, American nuclear missiles on British soil, just explain to us what that means.
Well, at the moment, you've got no more than a funding line. So the first question is, under what circumstances might they arrive? And that is really to do with the deterioration of the geopolitical situation with Russia. Next question is, under what circumstances might they leave? And that is if you have the political circumstances.
But you know what, Chip? Chip, I'm just going to let me just bring Robert in while we fix your line, because I really want to hear what you've got to say, but it's going in and out a little bit. I don't know whether that is the Russians meddling with us. Robert Fox, if I can come to you first of all, just explain to our viewers, as Chip was doing there, what does it mean when we say we'd have American nuclear missiles on British soil?
Well, they're not missiles. There's a contingency, as Chip was explaining. There's a funding line for a development at RAF Lakenheath, which is it's the RAF nominally, of course, but it's really a very big, by UK standards, US base. They've got the new F-35A aircraft there, which is nuclear capable, and it's a contingency plan that they could be fitted with gravity bombs, nuclear bombs, tactical nuclear bombs they would be, because of the worsening situation in East Europe with Ukraine and Russia. And it's because of the unpredictability of Russia that they're doing this. Occasionally, almost week in, week out, you get some boast about a nuclear threat, whether from Putin himself, but particularly from Mr. Lavrov and one of his predecessors, great colleagues, Mr. Medvedev. And the fact is that Russia has had a very strong habit over the past 15, 20 years of breaking treaties and agreements that it has signed. And lately, the warning was that they're putting on pause. It's in a different area of nuclear weapons, but the big nuclear weapons, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty process. And so this is a warning sign. It came out, as Chip was saying, in a funding line for a contingency for a protected 144-bed dormitory at Lakenheath. Now, it is those protected dormitories are for, as they said, strategic contingency. Strategic contingency at Lakenheath would mean putting bombs back in the old nuclear protected bunker, which
Robert,
was down in 2008.
If those bombs, if a strategic decision was taken that these bombs were to be used, who takes that decision? Is it the Ministry of Defence here, the Prime Minister? Is it the Pentagon? Mixture of both? Who's got the finger on the button?
Andrew, it's a partnership,
right?
And but this also would come under the doctrine, that is the philosophy, and the policy of the nuclear umbrella of NATO. This is would be not the US and the UK going off and doing things on their own, that this would be part of the NATO partnership, because already you have forward bases in Germany, about 4 or 5, and 2 in Italy with these kinds of facilities. But it's very much part of America, the lead nuclear power in NATO, endeavoring very much to keep up with the Russians. But by the way, Chip probably is not in any way able to divulge this, but I would suspect that tactical nuclear weapons aboard submarines and things like that go in and out UK waters, UK airspace fairly regularly, not too regularly, but they do have to show a capability to reinforce, because that's the awful warning that Russia's posture over Ukraine has indicated.
So, Robert, would this, as you say, this contingency plan, would it make this country safer or more vulnerable?
I don't know, because I don't think that somebody's going to press a button because the UK is suddenly storing really in quite limited capability in nuclear bombs on its facility. It's not going to change minds, I think.
Let's bring Robert, we're going to bring Chip Chapman back into the conversation because we had difficulty with his audio. Chip, I don't know if you could hear Robert Fox. What is your take on this? Is this a good and positive development?
I would look at is, does it further the cause of deterrence? And I would argue it doesn't. Deterrence has worked very well. Nuclear deterrence. We have nuclear weapons in 5 countries: Belgium, Germany, Italy, England, and Turkey. And does it further? It would if you could reset relations with Russia. But Russia may be incapable. That's the real big strategic question. Can you reset relations with Russia? Or are they incapable of it?
I'm afraid we can't. Your line is very poor.
And I say wanted to talk to Chip about the new Defence Secretary. Robert, I'm old enough to remember Greenham Common, the wives and mothers at Greenham Common trying to stop American cruise missiles being positioned down there in Berkshire. This is nothing like that, is it?
Well, Greenham historically, and Molesworth, which was the other base for cruise missiles, was one of the original nuclear bases for nuclear weaponry in UK for the American forces from 1954. There have been protests, but it's really rather strange that it's very disappointing, if one could put it like that, the kind of output from CND on this. It's not very coherent. And it's not very much, rather in the line that Chip was arguing, in touch with the real world. I mean, CND's statement, and I'm not doing their job for them, on this potential, it's not actually declared deployment of gravity bomb that they are to Lakenheath. They say, oh, we want all nuclear weapons out of all of Europe. Blimey, with all this going on in Russia and the world on the cusp of a new nuclear arms race, which is a very important factor, with perhaps the awful prospect of rogue elements and even non-state actors over the next 20, 30 years getting some kind of nuclear weaponry. I mean, what kind of world we're in? Yes, we all want peace. No, we don't like war, and we don't like nuclear weapons. But actually, you've got to be practical. And the way that Russia is challenging the tolerance of the West is fascinating. But by the way, this is the one thing for all the dreadful things that have been done in and around Ukraine and moving missiles up and moving the missiles down, that it hasn't really practically deployed nuclear weapons, or not least as far as I can see, in and around Ukraine in this crisis.
Robert, we're just a bit short on time. I just want to ask you one quick question. New Defence Secretary this morning with Ben Wallace stepping down, Grant Shapps in that seat. Is that a good appointment from your point of view?
Safe pair of hands. Safe pair of hands. Don't rock the boat. Don't want any hurrahs and harumphs for or against Ukraine upsetting the election campaign. That's what that's about. Read the front page of the Evening Standard this afternoon.
OK. All right. Thank you so much, Robert Fox, from the Evening Standard. He's great.
I think there'll be a bit of flack over this appointment because there are so many people in the Tory party who have got genuine military experience, including Tugendhat, including James Heapley, the Deputy Defence Minister, who's very solid, actually.
You know what? Here's the thing,
officer.
right? We feel reassured by a Prime Minister that will surround themselves by people who don't necessarily agree with them. I would respect Rishi Sunak if he would put somebody in that position that isn't part of his chumocracy, that might challenge him on positions. I think it shows weakness, actually, to only surround yourself by yes men.
But the reason he's got the job is because he's run a ministry before. He knows how to do that, and he hasn't had too much controversy in his career. But,
it is a safe. I get the fact that it's a safe pair of hands, but it feels like they're an extra time, and you think you just got to throw everything at it. It's just you've got. This isn't the time necessarily for a safe pair. Well, maybe it is.
And
I know it's a long time since.
Tugendhat, of course, ran for the leadership, so that probably cost him.
Oh yeah.
So what? He didn't get it. He didn't get it.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Now,
anyway,
still to come, they'll be back. The dream team, Cara Malone busting in with her makeup, and Sam Lister, they'll be back. But here's first the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Andrew, thank you. It's 11:31. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Grant Shapps has been appointed as the new Defence Secretary as part of the Prime Minister's mini reshuffle at the top of government. It follows the resignation of Ben Wallace after 4 years in the job. He says he wants to explore different opportunities and spend more time with his family. Education Minister Claire Coutinho takes over as Energy and Net Zero Secretary, replacing Shapps. Police officers will be automatically dismissed if they are found guilty of gross misconduct under new government plans. Senior officers will have more powers to sack rogue staff and be able to dismiss those who fail vetting checks. The government says the changes could be implemented as soon as next spring. More than 70 people have died and at least 43 have been injured in a fire in Johannesburg. A multi-storey building caught fire in the South African city in the early hours of this morning, with children reportedly among those killed. A search and rescue operation is now underway, and the emergency services says the death toll is likely to rise. Around 121,000 patients died while waiting for NHS treatment in England last year. That's according to the Labour Party, which gathered data from all NHS trusts. It suggests people experiencing pain are waiting for care, with 7.6 million still on waiting lists at the end of June. The government says cutting waiting lists is one of the Prime Minister's key priorities. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2679 and €1.1663. The price of gold is £1,534.13 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,476 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Still to come, guess who's groaning and moaning? Yes, Prince Harry. He says no one helped him cope.
When you say Prince Harry.
So apparently no one helped him cope with his mother's death. What about his brother, his father, and mental health charities that he's part of?
Well, this is Britain's Newsroom. More on that in just a minute. This is GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A bright start for some on this final day of August. Damp for others. Rain is pushing northeastwards, not making it feel particularly summer-like on this final day of meteorological summer. That rain lingering across Northern Ireland into Wales, the Midlands, southern parts of England by lunchtime. Scotland and northeast England faring best for dry and bright weather, some sunny spells, just the odd shower by the afternoon. And it's going to feel warm enough in the sunshine with light winds, 18 to 21 Celsius, disappointingly cool through Northern Ireland, northwest England into the Midlands, 16, 17 Celsius, for example. Then, as that band of rain pushes into northern England and parts of southwest Scotland, it fizzles away, but another pulse of activity arrives into the southwest and then trundles along the south coast through the early hours of tomorrow, with some heavy downpours expected with this. Quite a humid night, actually. Certainly higher temperatures compared with recent nights in the south. Still quite fresh across Scotland, where we keep the clear skies, and a beautiful start here. Plenty of sunshine first thing. The area of fizzling rain is still there across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. A few heavy showers develop across North Wales, but the more persistent wet weather clears away from the southeast England, only to be replaced by further heavy showers into the afternoon. But into the weekend, the promise of high pressure and drier weather for all.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows. Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Right, we're joined back in the studio by broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone and political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister, to go through some big stories of the day. Sam, this is your byline in the paper today in the Express, and it's about the fact that British Telecom have reneged on a deal to keep landlines. What have they done?
Yeah, this is... I don't think actually many people know that this is even happening. And what BT are doing, they're saying that the existing landline system, the analogue system, is out of date. It's not fit for purpose in this modern era. And so they need to get rid of it. And so they're replacing it with an internet-based phone system.
Really?
Yeah, and already 2 million people have been switched to this. But I mean,
do they know they've been switched?
Well, some I think they do. But I think, you know, how many people know about this?
No.
I don't think many people do. Now, a lot of campaign groups were involved in talking to BT about this, including one called Silver Voices.
Oh, yes, they're very good.
Yeah, very good campaign group. And they managed to negotiate a kind of opt-out for the over-70s. They said, don't switch to the over-70s. They rely on landlines more than people under 70.
Definitely.
Like, we need to make sure that these people are protected if they want to be. If you are over 70 and you want to switch, fine. But if you're not, then they need to keep their landlines. BT agreed to this. Now, they are kind of sneakily, some might say, changed the age limit, so actually it's the over 75s now. So there's an extra, you know, they've changed the age limit, so more people are caught in this.
They're trying to get rid of it, aren't
Yes,
they?
essentially. And Silver Voices are very angry about this. They say BT have reneged on their promises to protect the over 70s in this switch over, which is happening over the next year. I mean, you know, if you have a landline, it's happening.
So what is this odd thing they're replacing with? Because if it's technical, I'm going to struggle, and below won't be even worse.
Well, it's broadband. You need to have broadband. So
which lots of people over 75,
exactly. For
70
example,
don't have.
yeah, my nan, she died last year, but she did not have broadband.
Yeah. No.
So she relied on a landline phone. Many people of her era do not have broadband, and you're going to have broadband to have this new system.
Which you have to pay for.
You have to pay for.
What is it about this country? You know, we seem not to care. We're supposed to be a civilised country, yet we don't care about the elderly at all. Not at all. You know, the campaign for cash thing. You know, the withdrawal of cash affects the elderly more than anything else.
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to be in a country that cares for your old people, and you're supposed to nurture them. This is just saying you don't matter very much. And if you have broadband, even if you have broadband and you're over 70, what happens if it breaks and you live on your own? You can't fix it. I can't fix it. And I've got a husband who's like across all this stuff. I've got to ring him if he's abroad saying, how am I fixing this? Because I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, my dad's 86. My mum's going to go away for a few days with a friend, so he won't keep his mobile phone on him. He'll be watching this now. He's never got his little Nokia brick on. And we've said to my mum, you need to put a handset back in when you go away so we can ring him, because he'll hear the landline. And then we will know that we can get hold of him. They're just leaving people vulnerable. So vulnerable. There's so much social change. It's all tied to the same digital push.
I don't think I ever got my mother to answer a mobile phone, ever.
No, that's it.
Oh, well, I didn't hear it, dear.
I mean, I've still got a landline, but I never use it.
I've got one too.
And I purposely don't answer the phone because I don't want people ringing me on it.
Yeah.
Because I think I don't know you very well.
Well, it probably doesn't ring very often, Malone, actually.
And they're selling you something.
But if it's the landline in our house that rings, I know they're after money or something.
It's normally an 0800 number, actually, trying to flog you something. That's true.
But we have a landline specifically just because we have members of our family who live in a broadband not spot. And so they rely, the only way you can communicate is by
well,
landline.
yes.
And actually, when there are storms and the landline goes down, you can't contact them for days.
Sam, that's another issue, isn't it?
Yeah,
if you do live in an area like that.
And there are lots of rural areas.
And you almost think it's almost like having a phone is a human right these days, almost.
And you know, the elderly, they can't get to post offices now because they're shutting them. There's no banks because they're shutting all of those.
Shutting down cash
none
points.
of the cash points, all of that. So what are they supposed to do? You just
They can't park their car because they haven't got the app.
Exactly.
Oh, God, the car park. I was with a chum the other day. Well, two of us, combined age, we could not work that out.
No.
So we didn't pay anything. We thought, stuff it.
No, but you
and
will.
we were lucky. We got away with it.
Oh, because I did try and pay on an app, and I had a lady who was on here with me, Belinda Lucy. She's often on GB. She did it for me on the app, and they still did me. You know, we've had to fight it.
And you two are fast thinking,
but we can't do all that.
You know, you're not 90.
No, we're not.
But we can't do all
You're relatively young people who are living a vibrant and fulfilling professional life. Well, imagine what it's like. And he just turns up here every day. Imagine if you are in your 80s.
But you see them at the car parks now with
Can't do
people
it.
queuing.
Yeah, I know.
And everybody looking and saying, "Can you help?" It's so sad. Well, it's almost saying to you, "Oh, just stay at home."
Yeah. It's profit above people, and I feel like there is such a groundswell of opinion on this that the first company to come out and say we are putting people above profit and introducing people on the end of the phone or someone that will take your cash. There's an opportunity, a business opportunity here for somebody that will be the opposite of what we're going through.
Why are supermarkets increasing getting rid of cashiers?
Yes, all the time.
You're having to queue up, and then there's all the confusion that inflows, and yet people... My mum used to go to the same cashier in Sainsbury's every week, and she'd ask the same question about my dad.
And
it was a conversation.
Thing about cashiers in supermarkets, sometimes it's the only person, an elderly person sees every single day. There's an old girl that I talk to every week called Marge. She's probably watching. Marge.
Hi, Marge.
She's in her 80s. Hello, Marge.
Marge.
It was her birthday last week, and all the cashiers sang happy birthday when she walked in the store because they know her.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to lose. You're going to lose the only thread they have with a community, and I just think it's
humanity.
I know.
Retain humanity. Right, Prince Harry.
Groan. Theatrical groan. Theatrical groan.
That's all I have to say.
Do you know what?
Can't help himself,
Playing
can he?
the victim again. And
I know.
you know, this guy is obviously trying to justify his Netflix contract, and he's thinking, what can I do? Oh, I'll moan a bit about how I never got looked after when I came back from Afghanistan, and how the media, because he always has to have a pop at the media, how the media completely ignored veterans and military heroes. Absolute and utter tosh, and I'm amazed Netflix have let him say this. Do you remember the Help for Heroes
I was just about to say Help for Heroes.
Ago?
Huge publicity.
375 million. There wasn't a single one of us not wearing those wristbands.
Front page of the papers.
My husband had about 7 on, and we were all out there. And newspapers all the time write about our heroes. We write about the needs of the military when they come back from war, not just their achievement. We write about what happens when they fall on hard times and what they need after the war. And he's saying, he's moaning about that, but he's also saying he didn't have any help. Hello, he's the Prince of Wales. And we know that in 2017, he did a podcast and he said that his brother Wills helped him get help with a therapist, and he also has 2 aides that helped, who were former military, who helped him get things. He's the most privileged man on the planet and has access to every single therapist there is. And I just think, stop whinging and moaning about your lot in life, because it's a pretty good lot. And you know what he's not taught, what he has slags off the media? He forgets that a lot of media correspondents got closer to action than he ever did, and a lot of them have died.
They have.
It's just rewriting history, Sam, do you think?
Yeah, and I do try. I try my very hardest to always be fair to Harry, because I think,
Don't.
everybody's on his back.
As a child who lost his mum, my sympathy is there.
And I do feel it's clearly like, he's never really got over that, and that is completely understandable. But I do think, actually, it's very unedifying to have, a member of the royal family who has access to all the privileges he has access to, moaning about that, when you have people like Ben Parkinson, a war hero from Doncaster, who was the most injured, soldier to come back.
And Sam, he said today, I don't know what Harry's talking about.
And you think, actually, that is somebody who, despite having a terrible, terrible time, suffering horrendous injuries, actually is always out there, is always trying to inspire people and get on with life. And then you have Harry.
And you know, Malone mentioned some of his aides. So I remember Jamie Lowther Pinkerton was his private secretary.
Yes.
He was in the SAS.
And he
was in the Gulf War.
Completely.
And I used to deal with him. You wouldn't get a tougher, more straight guy. He knows about the horrors. He was in the first Gulf War. He was an incredible support to Prince Harry. And Harry's completely skating over that.
Yeah.
And it's just not right.
And he's also saying that the military didn't get support. The media, there was no bigger support for the Invictus Games and for that charity than the media, because we adored what he was doing. We thought it was a great job he was doing, and he had nothing but support for him. So for him to turn on them now and say, we have done nothing.
Yeah.
And just finally, I find it very galling when he's talking about, I had no support when I came back from Afghanistan. Look, these guys who he supports through Invictus, which is magnificent, some of them, no arms, no legs, broken bodies, broken minds. And they didn't have the fantastic resources at their disposal that Harry had.
They haven't got a palace to sort out a bit of help for them.
They don't. Or a Jamie Lowther Pinkerton.
Let's look at this other big story then, Sam, today. This is Suella Braverman giving police chiefs powers to sack rogue cops. And some people have said it's going to just basically result in kangaroo courts where a police officer steps out of line, his boss can sack him.
Well, I mean, that is what the Police Federation are saying, and they would say that, wouldn't they?
Of course.
I think, you know, it kind of beggars belief that we've got to this point where you have to actually, you know, announce this kind of measure, because the fact that police chiefs have not been able to sack serving officers who are guilty of gross misconduct. So gross misconduct, it can be sexual assault, it can be theft. You know, it can be violence, it can be all kinds of things. But you know, in what world should a police officer be, you know, found guilty of theft and then be able to carry on keeping their job, or sexual assault? I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous.
And keeping their pay and keeping their pension.
Yeah, pensions.
And their gold-plated pensions.
Absolutely. So this is giving police chiefs, which Mark Rowley, the Met Chief Constable, he's been asking for this power for some time. And so it is a victory for him. I think there are an awful lot of police officers who are serving in forces across the country who have been found guilty of misconduct and who have actually been sacked and then reinstated into their jobs.
Yeah, there are 500 Met officers on restricted duty now, suspended. There are 150
on full pay, presumably.
On full pay, suspended because of sexual assault and racism charges. And even they could be. And the panel now that looks into them, they're not cops.
Yeah.
I've forgotten, there's a name for it, and I was trying to find it before I came on. I can't. But it's a panel. So the top cops aren't involved in that panel, and yet they decide the future of these cops, which I think is utterly shocking. But, you know, people, when you think about people like Wayne Couzens, had top cops been allowed to sack him, maybe he wouldn't have gone on to murder.
I mean, what was his nickname? Wasn't he nicknamed a rapist or something?
Pervert, no.
Rapist.
Or the rapist?
Was it the pervert?
He had a terrible nickname, which
was that not
rather gave the game away.
Was that not the guy who was convicted of 30-odd rapes?
But I think, you know, there's another story today, Sergeant Graham Saville, who sadly lost his life trying to help somebody in Newark
on the train line.
Horrible incident.
Awful story.
The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, he's called, because it's happened in his patch, he's called for a posthumous award for Sergeant Saville. And, you know, you have to always remember that, actually, being a police officer is a really difficult job, you know. I think any of us would struggle to do it. It's a really tough job. And there are real heroes in the police service. And the people who are found guilty of gross misconduct and still in the service, it's an insult to people like Sergeant Saville. And, you know, the fact that this is now finally happening, although it's probably not going to happen until next year.
And I checked, it was Wayne Couzens, nicknamed the rapist 3 years before he murdered and raped Sarah Everard.
You know, all cops now are suffering reputational damage because of these rotten apples. You know, would you get into a cop if a policeman said to you, get into my car, would you? I wouldn't. Because of Wayne Couzens and because of the other guy, David Carrick, because of those, I would not get into a police car now. You'd literally have to drag me kicking and screaming. And that is bad for the good cops, you know. There are lots of good ones.
And we should remember, most of them are good cops.
Exactly.
99%.
And these people are ruining their reputations.
Carol, let's touch on this last story about the ULEZ reviewer who had their funding links to the mayoral office, to the London office. What's this about?
This is a shocking story because, I mean, everybody's been quoting from this study, Sadiq Khan mainly, saying that what's it called, nitrous dioxide, 29% in that ULEZ has reduced it by 29%.
Yeah,
This study is tosh because the real study, the important study, is the one that was done by Imperial College scientists, which said that it had barely touched, it had only reduced nitrogen dioxide by 3%. Now this the review that Khan is quoting, it's a guy called Gary Fuller. He's not a scientist, he's a member of the Environmental Research Group, and that's received 891 grand from Khan's office since 2020. So what it means is, and he's supposed to be impartial. No, he's not. He writes a climate column for The Guardian, and he works for the Environmental Research Group. So this guy is not impartial. But yet Khan has been allowed to quote this thing, it's reduced by 29%. And Shirley Rodriguez, the deputy mayor, actually put out that statement. She doctored this and said that the report had that ULEZ had dramatically reduced pollution, and it has not.
20 seconds, Sam. Are your readers a fan of ULEZ or not?
Absolutely not. I mean, they see it for what it is, which is a tax on motorists by a Labour mayor that is anti-car.
Is he not saving the environment?
I don't think that's... I think he's got other agendas.
I'm not sure he's going to touch that.
I tell you what, a lot of Labour MPs are getting very nervous about it.
They're very angry about it, actually.
And they're going to use their seats. Right. Carol Malone, Sam Lister, wonderful to see you both, as always. That is it for Britain's Newsroom today. Up next, it's the live desk with Mark Longhurst, who's here to tell us all about it. What's coming up, Mark?
Well, stand by your beds. Grant Shapps gets his call-up papers. He's made Defence Secretary, his 5th job, no less, in 12 months. As the former head of the British Army says, he doesn't know very much about defence. However, he has already pledged the MOD's continued support for Ukraine against what he called Putin's barbaric invasion. What do the Ukrainians think? We'll have the views live of former President Petro Poroshenko. And twice in a blue moon, more on that super event that takes to the skies tonight and won't be seen again until 2037. We'll be taking you skywards just to take a look and see what's going to be in store for us. Stay with us.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A bright start for some on this final day of August. Damp for others. Rain is pushing northeastwards, not making it feel particularly summer-like on this final day of meteorological summer. That rain lingering across Northern Ireland into Wales, the Midlands, southern parts of England by lunchtime. Scotland and northeast England faring best for dry and bright weather, some sunny spells, just the odd shower by the afternoon. And it's going to feel warm enough in the sunshine with light winds, 18 to 21 Celsius, disappointingly cool through Northern Ireland, northwest England into the Midlands, 16, 17 Celsius, for example. Then, as that band of rain pushes into northern England and parts of southwest Scotland, it fizzles away, but another pulse of activity arrives into the southwest and then trundles along the south coast through the early hours of tomorrow, with some heavy downpours expected with this. Quite a humid night, actually. Certainly higher temperatures compared with recent nights in the south. Still quite fresh across Scotland, where we keep the clear skies, and a beautiful start here. Plenty of sunshine first thing. The area of fizzling rain is still there across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. A few heavy showers develop across North Wales, but the more persistent wet weather clears away from the southeast England, only to be replaced by further heavy showers into the afternoon. But into the weekend, the promise of high pressure and drier weather for all.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays.